Distinguished participants, so we will now begin session 1, highlighting parental leave as a policy response to low fertility. Our policy-focused discussions will be moderated by a moderator for each of the sessions. And for session 1, I'd like to introduce Dr. Laurent Telemont, Senior Researcher of French Institute for Demographic Studies, known as INED. With that, I'd like to give the floor to Dr. Telemont.
Well, thank you. As we have a busy session, I think the presenters will have only 5 minutes each. So maybe we could go directly to the first presenter. I don't know whether you want to introduce her or...
You can introduce the presenters and discussants.
Okay, so I will give the floor to Dr. Anna Kurowska from the University of Warsaw. So Anna, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Oh, great. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's my pleasure to give a short introduction to this session, which is on parental leaves and whether they can influence or support fertility, and if so, then how. Okay, so there are several theoretical mechanisms behind the link between parental leaves and fertility, or parenting, I would say, leaves, because parenting leaves means parental, maternity, and paternity leaves. So first of all, theoretically, they could reduce the tangible and non-tangible costs of childbearing. If parenting leaves are of proper length, not too short, not too long, they can reduce opportunity costs. Then they can enable women to remain employed and pursue their professional careers while having children. If parenting leaves are well paid, they also can reduce material costs of childbearing. And if on top of it, we add father quota within well-paid parental leaves, then this can potentially lead to higher use of leave by fathers and their higher engagement in childcare and housework, and thus reduce costs related to increased burden with unpaid work for mothers. Higher engagement of fathers in parental leave and subsequently in childcare, housework can also potentially positively impact partnership stability and quality, and therefore also through this way support subsequent childbearing. And finally, there are also some potential symbolic effects as investing in childcare, providing well-paid parental leaves with father quota. This sends a message to a society that childbearing is a valuable outcome in the first year after birth. And if especially father quota are very well paid, this sends a message that childbearing is as important as paid work in this first year. But of course, all this happens in a context, institutional, cultural, and socioeconomic. And this context may strongly impact this link between parenting leaves, and fertility. If, for example, there is a huge childcare gap between the end of a well-paid parental leave and the beginning of the entitlement to childcare, formal childcare, institutional childcare, then parental or maternity leave may not really help women to remain employed if after the parental leave they have to stay at home and take care for a child because there is no access to childcare. Also, if childbearing costs of different kinds are very high, then simple well-paid parental leave may not be helpful. Finally, for example, if we introduce father quota in very traditional society with a strict traditional gender roles for men and women, then this again may not have much of an effect of fathers being more engaged in childcare. Currently, I'm leading a project on parental leave uptake by fathers in Sweden, Germany, Poland, and Japan. And we see huge differences in the way fathers use leave, if they use it at all. So similar parental leave provisions, because in all of these 4 countries, there is a father quota, rather well paid, so non-transferable leave available to fathers, but the use of that leave and the motivations behind the use of that leave are very, very different. Now, let's have a short look at the summary of quasi-experimental studies that looked in particular on the link between parental leave reforms, or parenting leave reforms, I would say, and fertility. There are much more studies on the topic, but only quasi-experimental ones can really look into the causal aspect of it, so the influence of parental leave reforms on fertility. As you can see, these studies were carried out in many different countries and looked at many different reforms. So there's a difficulty in comparison between some studies do show positive effects. A study in the US, study in Canada and Germany showed some positive effects of extension of parental leave or maternity leave. But these, of course, reforms were very different between these countries. But mostly it was a time effect, not really quantum effect. So it was rather the effect of timing of birth, not really the effect on total fertility rates in a longer perspective. When it comes to father quota introduction, we don't have yet, at least, strong evidence of impact of such introduction of father quota on fertility. There is some insight, but also a temporary increase of fertility of introduction of father quota in Sweden, but in a very small, certain specific group. These were families with a father having a low income. So, to sum up, there is some, but only some, causal empirical evidence on the positive impact of well-paid parenting leaves on fertility, less on introduction of father quota. But please remind that these doing such studies is a very difficult task, and we need much more of these studies to really say more about it. What is very important is that we need more studies to disentangle the different mechanisms through which parenting leaves can, or parenting leave reforms can influence actually fertility. And I would like to also say that we should beware of so-called good practices. And I think already it was said during the keynote, Thomas mentioned that really it depends on the context, whether a solution works. So we cannot just take a parental leave scheme from one country, put it in another one, and expect the same positive results. We've seen it in different countries that introduced similar leaves as in Sweden, and there were no effects on, for example, father take-up of leaves. And finally, I think this is very important, and Thomas already mentioned it, that there are many other valuable outcomes that can be achieved with well-paid parental leaves, with generous father quotas, and additionally, with a closed childcare gap. We can support well-being of families, not necessarily think about increasing fertility. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, well, there were many topics. Maybe you will take my chair. Let me now introduce Dr. Allan Puur without further delay, who will tell us about an Estonian experiment.
Good morning. My presentation is about a recent study where we looked at the effects of parental leave benefits on fertility in Estonia. So Estonia belongs to Eastern European countries which experienced a drop to very low fertility in the 1990s in the context of societal transformation. And in that context, earnings-related parental leave benefits were selected as a key measure to reduce costs of childbearing. And in this presentation, I will then try to analyze how this measure has worked. First of all, a few words about the reform. The reform was made in 2004, and it was very much modeled on a basis of on an example of Nordic countries, especially Sweden. So the reform replaced earlier low flat rate benefits with quite generous earnings-related benefits, and the duration of payment was initially 11 months, but it was quite soon extended to 1.5 years. An important part of the reform was the introduction of the so-called speed premium feature, which means that parents who space their children close can retain the benefit that they earned before the previous child. And most of the leave can be shared between parents. The non-transferable parts are there, but they are quite small. So in reality, the practice is that the leave is mostly used by women, although the father's uptake has been increasing over time. What follows, I will try to show the effects of this reform then on fertility behavior on a couple of slides. This first slide here shows the second birth rates at short durations after the first birth for a woman who had their first child starting from 1995. And what you can observe here is that starting from the 2003 cohort, this was the first cohort affected by the reform, there is an increase in fertility second birth rates at short durations. But interestingly, we don't see any change at slightly longer duration. So this means that the speed premium feature has played a quite important role in increasing fertility. In the next slide, I have progression to second birth for two cohorts of women who had their first child several years before the reform, more precisely 8 years and 4 years. And you can see here that at the beginning, at the earlier durations, these two cohorts follow the quite similar path. But after some 5 years, the later cohort will show higher parity progression. And what's important here is that this higher parity progression emerges exactly at the point where this later cohort becomes exposed to the reform. When we look at later cohorts who had their first child in 2004 or 2006, then these are the cohorts who benefited from the reform right from the beginning of this birth interval. And you can see that they show higher parity, even higher parity progression at all durations, and this higher parity progression persists until the end of observation. So it is basically a sign that there is also not only timing effect, tempo effect, but also a quantum effect. And this, the presence of these two effects actually were confirmed in multivariate analysis. We used mixture models here, and what we found was that in the post-reform period, the odds of having a second child increased by approximately 25%. So this odds ratio doesn't say much, but if we translate it into the probability of having a second child, then it's a moderate increase of about 5.5 percentage point. And also there was a significant reduction in the duration of birth interval. And more or less the same results we found for having a third child. So to sum up, indeed, in our reform, we found that there were several effects on fertility of this generous earnings-related parental leave. First, there was shortening of birth intervals or tempo effect. Then there was also a quantum effect, a slight or moderate increase in parity progression. And then there was also a third effect, which relates to differences between subgroups. So it were the most educated women who benefited most from this reform, and this reduced the negative educational gradient in fertility. The negative gradient didn't disappear, but it became much weaker. And this is basically what we found. I have also a couple of questions, but we can discuss them later, as I probably used up my 5 minutes. So thank you, and here are the references to the published work.
Thank you, Allan. So let me give the floor to our last presenter, Dr. Boksil Lee, who will present us an experiment in a LOTTECARD company, or a little more than an experiment, their behavior within the company.
네. 네, 안녕하세요. 반갑습니다. 저는 롯데카드 ESG 위원장을 맡고 있는 이복실입니다. 여태까지는 여러분들께서 교수님들의 아카데믹한 연구에 대해서 들으셨다면, 지금부터는 저는 그 한국 기업의 사례에 대해서 설명드리겠습니다. 롯데카드는 어떤 기업인지부터 먼저 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 롯데카드는 신용카드업을 주로 하고 있고요. 지금 현재 직원 수가 한 1,600명 달하고 있습니다. 2002년에 설립이 되었는데요. 남성이 47%, 여성이 53%로 여성 직원이 남성보다 많이 있습니다. 그리고 지금 한국 사회의 가장 큰 문제인 저출산 문제 해소를 위해서 일가정 양립 제도를 주요한 직원들의 관심사이기 때문에 지금 이 문제는 개인의 책임을 넘어서 기업의 의무, 사회적인 의무라는 인식을 바탕으로 임신, 출산 때부터 그다음에 그 육아 과정까지 전 라이프 타임에 맞춰서 지금 지원을 하고 있습니다. 하지만 오늘은 이제 초점이 육아휴직 제도이기 때문에 육아휴직에 맞춰서 설명을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 하지만 이제 임신 중에 그 사례에 대해서 복지 혜택에서 잠깐 말씀드리면 태아 검진 시간이라든지 또 임신기 근로시간 단축 제도, 그다음에 유산했을 때 또 사산했을 때 그런 휴가 제도를 도입하고 있고요. 출산 후에도 육아기 근로시간 단축, 육아휴직 제도, 자녀 입학을 했을 경우에 돌봄 휴직 제도를 도입하고 있습니다. 육아휴직제도는 한국 정부는 지금 이제 그 남녀고용 평등 및 일가정 양립 지원에 관한 법률에 근거해서 지금 이제 1년을 부여하고 있는데 롯데카드 같은 경우는 1+1로 1은 정부에서 지원하는 1년이고요. 1은 이제 노사 간의 합의에 의해서 취업 규칙을 제정해서 1년을 추가로 더 지금 할 수 있도록 되어 있습니다. 이것은 남녀 모두 동일하게 혜택을 받고 있습니다. 그러면 육아휴직 사용률이 얼마가 되는가 한번 보겠습니다. 여성 근로자의 경우에는 육아휴직 사용률이 91.6%입니다. 그리고 추가로 1년을 더 쓰는 육아휴직 비율은 62.8%가 되겠습니다. 그리고 아까 우리 조금 전 발표자들께서 남성 육아휴직이 중요하다, 육아휴직에서 말씀해 주셨는데요. 그 부분도 롯데카드에서 신경 쓰고 있는 부분 중에 하나입니다. 남성들이 육아에 적극 참여할 수 있도록 그 남성 육아휴직 한 달을 의무화시켜서 이때는 통상임금의 100%를 지원하는 제도를 특별하게 하고 있습니다. 배우자 출산 휴가 이용률은 남성들의 경우 90%에 달하고 있고요. 육아휴직 이용자 중 남성 근로자 비율은 25.9%입니다. 이 비율은 전체적인 한국의 남성 근로자의 휴가나 육아휴직을 다녀왔을 때 경력 단절 없이 계속 근무할 수 있도록 하는 것이 중요한 포인트인데요. 저희는 출산 전후 휴가 후 고용 유지율은 97.7%에 달하고 있고 육아휴직 이후에 고용 유지율도 92%에 달하고 있습니다. 다음 이제 그 육아휴직과 더불어서 일가정 양립 제도를 하고 있는 것을 말씀드리겠습니다. 일가정 양립 제도를 이제 저는 이제 4가지 축으로 보고 있습니다. 하나는 육아휴직 제도, 두 번째는 일과 시간, 근로 시간과 근로 장소의 유연화, 세 번째는 육아휴직 이후에 아기를 또 믿고 맡길 수 있는 시설, 네 번째는 일과 가정 양립을 위한 직장 문화, 이 4가지 축이 될 수가 있겠는데요. 육아휴직과 더불어서 또 유용 근로제도를 적극 지금 운영하고 있습니다. 그래서 시차 출퇴근 제도는 활용률이 53.4%에 달하고 있고요. 그리고 부분 자율 출퇴근 제도는 활용률이 58.4%입니다. 근데 여기서 퍼센테이지가 중요한 것이 아니라 롯데카드는 이 휴가를 낼 때 결제자가 없습니다. 내가 스스로 결제를 합니다. 그래서 남의 눈치를 보지 않고 내가 결제해서 나 스스로 휴가를 낼 수 있는 점, 이것이 굉장히 중요한 점이라는 점을 강조해서 말씀드리고 싶습니다. 그래서 이제 이러한 노력을 인정받아서 지금 그 여성가족부 가족친화 인증 기업을 2013년부터 지금 이제 10년 이상 유지하고 있고요. 고용노동부 남녀고용평등 우수기업, 그리고 대한민국 일자리 으뜸 기업으로 선정된 바가 있습니다. 그래서 아마 제가 오늘 이 자리에서 발표를 한 것이 아닐까 생각합니다. 앞으로 롯데카드는 계속해서 우리 사회의 문제인 저출산 문제를 해소하기 위해서 기업도 여기에 적극 동참해서 근로자들이 원하는, 직원들이 원하는 일가정 양립 제도의 유지와 발전을 위해서 노력하겠습니다. 이상 발표를 마치겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. So now we had our 3 presentations. So the session will be organized as follows. We will have an overall discussion first with the 2 discussants, Dr. Kyunghee Kim from the Social Statistics Planning Division in KOSTAT, and then Mrs. Karolina Andrian, President of the Childcare Foundation. So each of them could discuss the presentation during, let's say, 5 minutes, and then we will have a round table. And after that, there will be 30 minutes for a discussion with the audience. But if you have a very important and present question, maybe you can try and interrupt us during the discussion. But let me first give the floor to Dr. Kim.
안녕하십니까. 통계청 사회통계기획과장 김경희입니다. 오늘 심포지움에 참석해서 굉장히 기쁘게 생각하고요. 세 분 발표자님께 감사드립니다. 저는 육아휴직 통계를 작성하는 통계청 직원으로서 우선 통계청의 육아휴직 현황을 설명을 드리고 각 세 분께 질문을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 2022년 한국의 합계 출산율은 0.78명이고 아까 그 그래프에서도 보셨듯이 OECD 가입 국가 평균 1.51에 비해서 저희는 절반 수준입니다. 그래서 한국 정부는 지금 앞에서 뭐 여러분들께서 한국 그 정책 제도에서 말씀하셨지만 올 6월에 굉장히 큰 대책을 마련을 했습니다. 그 대책은 일가족 양립의 방점 주요한 목적을 찍고 있고 그다음에 세 가지 정도로 요약을 할 수가 있습니다. 첫 번째는 일가족 양립을 중요하게 여기면서 육아휴직 제도를 더 강화한다는 거고요. 네. 두 번째는 보육에 관련입니다. 아이를 낳으면 기를 때 국가에서 적극적으로 보육에 힘쓴다. 그다음에 세 번째는 주거의 안정입니다. 지금 아까 토마스 박사님께서 말씀하셨듯이 집값에 대해서 많이 말씀하셨거든요. 한국도 마찬가지입니다. 그래서 집값을 안정화하는 것을 어떻게 정부에서 할 것인가 이게 가장 큰 세 가지입니다. 그리고 저희 한국에서는 이제 육아휴직을 급여를 받을 수 있는 거는 조건을 잠깐 말씀드리고 결과를 말씀드리겠습니다. 육아휴직을 받을 수 있는 사람은 근로자여야 됩니다. 인플로이여야 되고요. 그다음에 직장에서 6개월 이상 근무를 하면서 자녀가 8세 이하여야고 아까 저 이복실 그 롯데카드 이사님께서 말씀하셨듯이 1년간 할 수 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 이런 제도가 있고 육아휴직 급여는 1년 동안 통상 임금의 한 80% 해당하는 150만 원 정도를 저희가 이제 지급을 하고 있습니다. 그러면 2022년 육아휴직 통계 잠깐 설명을 드리면은 저희 8세 미만 자녀에 대해서 육아휴직 통계 전체를 봤을 때 엄마가 70%, 아빠가 한 27% 사용하고 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 남자 비율이 굉장히 낮다는 거 알 수 있고요. 그다음에 이렇게 남자 비율이 낮은 거는 저희가 이제 반전이 있었습니다. 2022년에 어떤 제도를 도입을 했냐면 엄마 아빠가 동시에 육아휴직을 사용한다 그러면은 6개월, 즉 기존의 1년에서 6개월을 더 주는 제도를 마련하고 나니까 아빠의 육아휴직 비율이 굉장히 올랐습니다. 그렇기 때문에 이런 거가 지금 계속 출생아 수가 감소를 하고 있지만 출생률이 감소하고 있지만 올해 반전되는 계기를 만들었지 않았나 이렇게 생각이 듭니다. 저희 그 통계청에 대한 그 한국에 대한 설명을 잠깐 마치고 그 세 분 발표자님께 잠깐 질문을 드리도록 하겠습니다. 첫 번째 쿠로스카 박사님께 설명 잘 들었고요. 아주 흥미있는 발표에 감사드립니다. 다만 웰페이드의 단어에 대해서 굉장히 궁금한데 뭐 어떤 아까 에스토니아 같은 경우는 100% 라고 했었는데 웰페이드의 개념은 몇 퍼센트 했는지 궁금하고 그다음에 아빠 그 father quota를 말씀하셨는데 각 국가마다 father quota가 몇 퍼센트가 되는지 설명해 주셨으면 좋겠습니다. 그다음에 알란 퓨 박사님께 에스토니아 사례 예 정말 감사드리고요. 저희랑 좀 비슷한 경험을 하지 않았나 생각이 듭니다. 다만 이제 코트 규모가 궁금합니다. 코트 규모가 어떻게 돼서 그런 결과를 얻었게 됐는지 아무래도 코트 같은 경우에는 전수의 개념일 것 같아서 규모에 대해서 궁금하고 또 그와 관련해서 보통 규모가 크면은 그 지금 사용하는 방법, 비모스 방법보다 다른 방법을 사용했으면은 어떨까 하는 생각이 들어서요. 지금 카플러 마이어 방법을 사용하셨는데 다른 방법도 있었는지 개인적으로 좀 궁금합니다. 그다음에 마지막으로 우리 롯데카드 설명해 주셨는데 그 저출생 대책은 정부뿐만 아니라 민간의 역할이 굉장히 중요합니다. 근데 이제 롯데카드가 선두적으로 해서 많은 분들이 그 롯데카드에 대한 이미지 여러 가지 좋을 것 같은데요. 저는 다만 좀 아쉽지만 롯데카드에서 이제 그 출생아나 육아휴직 제도가 많이 했으면 아까 잠깐 설명을 드렸지만은 합계 출산율을 계산해서 홍보를 하신다 그러면은 굉장히 기업 이미지를 홍보할 때 좋을 것 같습니다. 이상 마치겠습니다.
Thank you. So you have heard the questions. Maybe you could keep it for 5 minutes and I will give the floor to Mrs. Andrian to complete the discussion. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for inviting me here. I represent the NGO working in Poland on engaging men in fatherhood. In 2023, Poland implemented the Work-Life Balance Directive, European Work-Life Balance Directive, that guaranteed non-transferable father quota leave to 9 weeks. And we were the NGO that was advocating to implement this directive quickly and pushing government to make it adjustable to Polish context, because as it was mentioned before, it is really important not to copy the implementation from the other countries, but to adjust it to the context we have in Poland. So what was important for us at the beginning, what we pushed for importance of work-life balance for the people. We conducted the researches, the focus group among young people who are not having babies, planning babies, and having small babies. And we looked for the arguments that can be supporting the implementation of the work-life balance. And what we found is, of course, people are not having babies to increase the total fertility rate. They are not having babies to implement gender equality or social justice as well. They are having babies for the benefits of child. This is the most important argument. And the second important argument is the influence on the relationship between woman and man, on the partnership. And the main argument that we based on is the research from the Polish Statistic Institution that researched the preferred model of the family. And the preferred model of the family in Poland is a partnership model, meaning that people are working, mother and father are working professionally and sharing equally childcare and domestic chores. Of course, this is an aspiration of the Polish people because the life looks a little bit different. But this is important that to look for the aspiration and to adjust the policies that are answering the aspiration of the Polish of the people. And what we did, we based our campaign on building the partnership between women and men, building the well-being of the family, of the relation between men and women, and also the benefits for the child. So we put ahead the gender equality arguments, social justice arguments, and of course the demography, and we push for the child benefits. And the results in Poland, I have some data for you. Before the implementation of the Work-Life Balance Directive, non-transferable parental leave for fathers mainly, an individual right for father to parental leave, we have only 1% of fathers on parental leave. So the parental leave was introduced in Poland in 2013, and it was only 1% each year, the uptake of parental leave of fathers. In 2023, when the Work-Life Balance Directive was implemented in April, the amount of fathers taking parental leave was 7%. And in 2024, right now, we are running the monitoring together with the Polish insurance organization, state. We already have around 15% of the fathers on parental leave. But of course, this is not only, there is a question of how long the parental leave is. Before the implementation, the average length of parental leave of fathers uptake was around 98, around 100 days. Right now, it's half of it. It's only 50 days. So what we are after right now is to show how the importance of fathers and to build the competence of the fathers, and they believe that they are equal carer, and they believe that they are really important for the child development and child well-being. Because what we found in our research before the implementation of Work-Life Balance Directive was also that for fathers, what fathers think is that mother is the first carer for the child. Mother is the best. So the logic of the thinking of the father is that when I'm taking care of the child, so I'm taking the parental leave, I'm replacing mother. So it's something worse, not equally good for the child, but this is a replacement. So what is important right now is to put a little bit more encourage men to take care of the child, and to put and to teach them self-confidence in being a carer, and also to referring to Thomas said about this positive and engagement is what is important for us to redefine the family, because family is associated with the traditional values. What do we need? We need to put a new definition of family, more future oriented, more adjusted to the present situation, more aspiring for the young people, that the family is something which is worth pursuing and can be can influence our well-being and can help us to fulfill our goals, life goals, like professional career, family bonds with a child, but also relationship with our spouse or our partner. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this nice discussion. So maybe I will let the presenters the opportunity to answer very quickly to Dr. Kim's very accurate questions. And then we will have an overall discussion, maybe based on Mrs. Andrian overview, which is, I think, very broad and interesting. And I will maybe introduce again the discussion based on the presentations and the discussion. So let's take the presenters in the order they made their presentation. So Anna, if you want to answer.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if I understood well, so please correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess the first question was, what is a well-paid leave? So in the literature, there are different definitions of it. They usually range between 65 to 80% of replacement rate of a salary. So the benefit on parental leave should be somewhere between 65 to 80%. The most common level is 70%. Nevertheless, I would like to mention, and I also wrote about it, a paper on it, that it really depends on the context. In very wealthy countries, or also among those families with decent incomes, 70% may be fine, but in other contexts, it's not enough, especially for fathers. Right? Because for mothers, mothers will go on maternity leave or parental leave if it's paid at 70% level. But for fathers, sometimes it needs to be much more. And what I would like to see, to be honest, I know that it may be controversial, but I really strongly believe that a truly well-paid leave is a 100% replacement rate. Why I do think so? Because for fathers, we have to give a symbolic message that care over a child is as important as paid work. If the replacement rate is lower, it's like 70%, for example, it gives a message, well, you know, childcare is not as important as your paid work. Secondly, if maternity leave, for example, as in Poland, it's the level of replacement rate on parental leave, maternity leave benefits, it's 100%. And for fathers on parental leave, it's 70%. It also gives a message, well, care by the father is less valuable than the care by the mother. So this is why 100% replacement rate on parental leave for fathers is extremely important. This is about a narrative, this is about a symbolic message, and I really also support this notion of reproductive empowerment and the empowerment of fathers as proper carers. We need to change the narrative because this shifts the norms in the long term. Yeah, and sorry, there was a second question about, yeah, what is the percentage of father quota? So how long, I guess, the father quota should be? So I would say it should be as long as this leave, maternity plus parental leave, that is addressed to mothers. So not only, because we usually have maternity leave, then we have parental leave, and we have quotas within the parental leave. You know, Sweden is maybe an example that has actually the same quota for both parents. But many countries, like for example, Poland, has a maternity leave of 20 weeks, and then 9 weeks of parental leave for mothers and 9 weeks of parental leave for fathers. But taking together maternity and parental leave, it's much more for mothers than for fathers. So ideally, I would say, let's have the same amount of a reserved well-paid leave for mothers and fathers.
Thank you for this answer, very inclusive for fathers. Allan, we will go back to that issue of gender participation. Allan, if you want to answer.
Yes. As if I understood correctly, the question was about the technical methods used in the analysis, which I presented, and we used 3 different approaches to measure the effect of parental leave reform. But first, we started with duration-specific fertility rates. Then we used Kaplan-Meier estimates, and finally we applied mixture models. And the idea of using these different approaches was to see whether the results about the effect of the reform are consistent and support each other. And I think that the role of Kaplan-Meier estimates, which your question was about, was exactly to see whether we can kind of see evidence of a causal effect in our data. And with models later on, we tried to quantify how big this effect is, but to see exactly at what point the effect of parental leave comes in, that was the reason why we used Kaplan-Meier estimates. I hope this at least partly answers your question.
Thank you. Yeah, maybe the takeaway message is that the parity progression from 1 to 2 child moved from 70%, 75% to 80%. So if we want to be positive, we can say that the proportion of women who did not have a second child moved from 25% to 20%. So I think this is a large increase, mainly at short duration, but as your Q method shows, it's not only a tempo effect. We have a...
Yeah. And exactly as Laurent said, that if we look at this effect 5.5 percentage points on the background that before the reform about 65 or 68% of women had second child, so we can say that it's on the magnitude of actually 7-8% of increase.
Thank you. So, Mrs. Lee, you were asked about the fertility of your employees, maybe the female as well as the male employees, and whether it changed after your policy.
네, 질문은 하셨는데요. 약간 이제 아직은 이제 그런 통계 비교에, 그러니까 출산율을 이런 정책을 했을 때 전후 어떻게 바뀌었는지 비교했으면 좋겠다, 이런 코멘트였던 것 같아요. 그래서 그거를 제안을 해서 그런 통계들을 좀 만들어 보도록 하겠습니다. 네, 코멘트 감사합니다.
Thank you. So, well, that's a good remark, knowing that the presentation showed that it was not easy to have a good estimate of the causal impact, the specific impact of parental leave. But on the other hand, there could be many other advantages, as Tomasz Sobotka spoke in general terms on family policy measures, but especially for parental leave and for gender equality, for the empowerment of fathers. There could be other advantages. So I would want to go further into that discussion with 2 points. First, thinking of the aims of putting a parental leave into motion, not from the point of view of the state or the number of births, but from the point of view of the inhabitants. Would that improve their well-being, and what would be the main demand? Is there a demand from the people to have something like a parental leave? And then the second question would be, what would be the criteria, not the best duration or the best amount, but what would be the criteria in different contexts to establish a good parental leave that would fit with the demand of the people? Whether, because I think that you have all said that the efficiency of the parental leave in terms of additional fertility would depend on the context. But it could be that the criteria, for instance, to make the inequality between mothers and fathers decrease, to empower the men as fathers, carers, to have a short or not too long, not too short parental leave, so that the penalty in terms of career for working mothers would not be too long. It seems that all these criteria are basically the same in all the contexts. It's more their implementation. So I would want to hear you on this aspect. So maybe we can make another round in the same order. So Anna, do you want to comment for that? So not too long, because we have only 15 minutes before the floor to be open to the audience. Thank you.
Yeah, when it comes to criteria, I said that the context matters, but the context matters, I would say, more on the efficiency of some solutions. Yeah, they can be more or less adequate for a specific context to work, but I would not say that there are specific differences in how parental leave should be created or designed that would be so different between countries. Yeah, so what I wanted, my message was that the effect of certain solution can be different depending on the context. But I would not say that, for example, I don't know, in more traditional countries, we should support mothers more than fathers. So I would not change my main message about how I would love to see parental leave look like. So I believe that across different countries, we should support well-paid parental leaves. There should be, that's an important maybe addition that I forgot to mention, there should not be a childcare gap between the end of a well-paid leave and the entitlement to childcare. This is something very important, right? So maybe sometimes we have to balance and temporarily have a longer parental leave, right, in order for childcare institutions to adapt and introduce entitlement to childcare earlier, right? Because it may be more difficult to adapt childcare facilities than introduce paid parental leave, but it should not last long. So for example, we should not close the childcare gap by extending paid parental leave only, but also by financing, funding, investing in early childcare. So, but it should be taken into account that expanding childcare facilities, building them, funding them, etc., making them accessible and affordable may take longer than providing parental leaves, right? So yeah, we should, I think, adapt to certain contexts, but when it comes to main criteria, main elements of what constitutes a proper parental leave scheme, that I would not say that is different between countries.
Thank you. So anyway, the other sessions will deal with these topics on childcare, but also maybe the topic of youth and how to organize something like a parental leave for young adults who may not have already entered their career or having a stable situation. But this would be for the other sessions, and I give the floor to Allan.
Thank you. I also cannot propose any ideal solution for the parental leave. What we learned from the Estonian experience was that really this coherence between different policies is very important. That in our case, the duration of paid parental leave was set at 18 months, and the 18 months is exactly the age of the child when municipalities are obliged to provide public childcare. So there shouldn't be any major gap between the two fields of policies. And maybe the second point, which I also based on this experience, would like to emphasize is the importance of this speed premium feature in these systems, because what we have seen in a way, this speed premium feature stimulates the shortening of birth intervals. And if we think about fertility development, then this shortening of birth intervals in a way works against these delay or postponement of entry into parenthood. So it helps in a way to catch up with continued childbearing and have a number of children that couples aim to have. And one additional point that after the reform in the early 2000s in Estonia, there was a quite big concern how this 1.5 year leave would affect, for example, gender pay gap. But what we have seen actually that it has not increased over time. We had at the turn of the millennium gender pay gap nearly 30%, which is really huge. And then if we look at it in early 2020s, it has been reduced to something like 13-14%. So it means that there are other factors that are more important and that are capable of reducing gender pay gap at the same time when we provide quite long, generous parental leave. Thank you.
Thank you. So just one sentence, because
Very short. Sorry, I just forgot about a very important thing, eligibility criteria. So we are talking about how long it should be, what should be the replacement rate, but countries differ a lot in terms of inclusivity of parental leave schemes. In some countries, like in Poland, it's extremely inclusive. We have leave and parental benefits for almost everyone, including unemployed students, etc. But in some countries, it's extremely difficult to be eligible for parental leave because, for example, you have to have a stable contract and a huge part of the society are left out. So this is something that we should also remember.
Yeah, thank you. I know that it is the case in Korea that there are a huge proportion of workers, and especially female workers, who are not eligible. Dr. Lee, if you want to comment.
네, 지금 두 분 말씀 잘 들었습니다. 한국에서도 여러 가지 비슷한 이슈들이 많이 있는데요. 저는 이제 기업의 입장에서 먼저 말씀을 드리면 육아휴직이라는 이런 제도 자체가 사실은 기업한테는 이게 비용으로 다가올 수가 있습니다. 근데 롯데카드 같은 대기업 또 일가정 양립을 주요한 미션으로 생각하는 직원들을 위한 그 미션으로 생각하는 기업 같은 경우에는 이것을 부담으로 느끼지 않고 있지만 대부분의 많은 중소기업들은 이것을 큰 부담으로 느끼고 있습니다. 그래서 정부에서 이런 부담을 완화하기 위한 노력을 좀 더 해줘야 될 것 같고요. 두 번째는 이제 육아휴직을 마음 놓고 쓰지 못하는 문화 이런 것이 한국에 아직 있었습니다. 근데 그래서 그런 문화를 깨기 위한, 그러니까 자유롭게 쓸 수 있는, 눈치 보지 않고 쓸 수 있는 그러한 문화를 만드는 그런 캠페인이라든지 의식 확산이라든지 이런 것들이 굉장히 중요할 것 같습니다. 그리고 세 번째는 이제 복귀 지원에 대한 프로그램인데요. 육아휴직 기간이 길다고 해서 좋은 것은 아닙니다. 이렇게 기간이 길 경우에는 더욱더 그 고용을 계속 유지할 수 있는 복귀 프로그램을 더 촘촘하게 아주 체계적으로 잘 만들어야 됩니다. 그래서 롯데카드는 기본적으로 육아휴직을 했을 경우에 자기가 원래 있던 포지션, 거기에 복귀하는 것이 원칙입니다. 그래야지만 안심하고 내가 휴직을 할 수가 있습니다. 근데 이제 때때로 그렇게 되지 않는 경우가 많이 있습니다. 왜냐하면 2년의 기간 동안 그 자리를 비워둘 수가 없기 때문에 그렇게 할 수가 없는 경우에는 반드시 사전에 네 자리가 다른 사람한테 갈 수도 있다. 그리고 너는 또 어떤 자리로 배치될 수 있다. 이런 거를 예고를 해줍니다. 그래서 휴직을 했을 때 불안하지 않게 내가 복귀하더라도 이 업무를 계속 할 수 있고 다른 업무에 갈 수 있는 그런 예측 가능성에 대해서 알려줍니다. 그래서 이런 프로그램들이 굉장히 중요할 것 같고요. 세 번째는 이제 남성 육아휴직인데 이제 육아휴직이 그전에는 한국도 다 여성의 전유물로 생각하고 여성에게만 혜택을 주고 이런 식으로 이제 유지를 하고 있다가 몇 년 전부터 이제 법이 바뀌면서 그 남성이 육아휴직을 했을 경우에 여성 육아휴직을 좀 봉급을 보존해주고 올리는 그런 방향으로 좀 정책이 방향이 많이 바뀌었습니다. 그래서 그런 부분 남성의 육아휴직을 활성화하고 확대하는 그런 정책들이 더 많이 필요하지 않나. 한국도 예외는 아니라고 생각을 합니다. 이상입니다.
컨텐츠에 대해서 두 가지 설명을 드리겠습니다. 첫 번째 기간입니다. 우선은 기간은 남자 여자 1년이라고 생각을 하는데 저는 1년 기간 아까 이복실 박사님도 말씀하셨지만 길다고 좋은 게 아닙니다. 두 가지를 설명드릴 수 있는데요. 남녀 평등과 남녀 맞돌봄이라고 생각이 됩니다. 그다음에 두 번째는 여성의 기간이 길어지면 여성의 경력 단절이 올 수 있는 가능성이 굉장히 높아집니다. 그렇기 때문에 기간이 길다고 좋지는 않고요. 다만 그 기간을 어떻게 남자 여자 즉 아빠와 엄마가 잘 활용하느냐 동등하게 활용하느냐가 중요하다고 보여집니다. 그래서 한국 정부는 맞돌봄이라고 해서 엄마 아빠가 같이 육아휴직을 사용하게 된다 그러면 예를 들면 아빠 3개월 엄마 3개월 하게 되면 더 그 육아휴직 기간을 증가하게 해줍니다. 그렇기 때문에 아이 입장에서는 굉장히 좋고 또 부모 입장에서는 맞돌봄을 했기 때문에 그 소득 보전 입장에서도 좋다고 보여집니다. 근데 전통적인 그 가치관에 있어서도 서로 같이 하는 거, 그다음에 이제 아까 말씀드렸듯이 경력의 단절을 방지할 수 있기 때문에 서로 그 돌봄을 공유하는 게 좋다고 생각이 들고요. 다만 두 번째는 이제 몇 퍼센트 소득 보전해 줄 것인가. 물론 웰페이드가 100%면 가장 이상적일 것 같습니다. 하지만은 아무래도 국가의 예산이라는 게 제한이 돼 있고 그다음에 모두 다 사용할 수 없는 거고 또 저는 통계청에 있기 때문에 예산을 배정하고 만드는 입장이 아니기 때문에 말씀을 못 드리겠지만은 최대한 많이 해주는 게 가장 좋을 것 같습니다. 제가 여기서 아까 인상적이었던 게 그 아이를 키우는 거하고 내 소득이 뭔가 깎이는 입장에 든다 그러면은 아무래도 돌봄을 등한시하게 될 것 같습니다. 내가 나가서 일하는 게 더 낫지 아이를 돌보는 게 더 가치가 있는 일이 아니구나. 왜냐하면 돈으로 계산되면은 비율이 낮아지기 때문에 생각이 들고요. 그래서 최대한 해줄 수 있지만 아까 말씀드린 대로 예산에 제한이 있기 때문에 같이 좀 고려를 해야 될 것 같습니다.
A lot of issues, very difficult to answer to. I also, maybe I mention another important thing is to limit the possibility for father. To limit the possibility of for the fathers to take parental leaves together with the mothers. I know that this is a little bit controversial sometimes, and we know that flexibility of the parental leaves is extremely important. But before the implementation of work-life balance directive, we strongly were trying to convince to limit this possibility. It wasn't made that way. Right now, what we are doing, we are trying to educate people what it means smart to take parental leave smartly and why it's important that fathers take parental leave after mother is coming back to work, that this is good for child, this is good for fathers and also very good for the mother because the experience the experience of coming back to the professional career is very important, how the woman perceive continuing of the career and work-life balance at all. So this first experience for the mother is important to shape it in a positive way, that coming back to work is possible to pursue, and that is it's not connected with such a struggle for the woman. So we educate, and also maybe I will mention the importance of the employers, of course. This is crucial. I don't know if Lotte is the only one company that is introducing family-friendly policies, or it is more popular in Korea. But we know that this is extremely important, that employers support family-friendly policies, flexibility, but what is really important, that it promotes all these policies not only towards women, but promotes it towards fathers. This is extremely important, because otherwise we'll have women only using flexible benefits, using parental leaves, extra care leaves, and etc., resulting in less participation on the labor market. So we encourage employers to build the narratives that includes fathers in their communication. We also work with employers to introduce some extra policies, for example, to top the allowance. In Poland, it is paid at the level of 70%. Right now, we have around 20 companies that are topping to 100% on parental leave for their employees, so it's important. And of course, the role of role models. This is extremely important, that the politicians, the managers in high positions are taking parental leaves, especially men, and also to show women who are successful in their career and also successful in family lives, that they can combine work and family together. So we as a foundation are running campaigns every year on Father's Day. And 2 years ago, when we were implementing work-life balance directive, we had we have a goal of how to use your 9 weeks of parental leave. So that was the notion. Last year, it was, I take, for the fathers, I take parental leaves because I want to, because I know why it's important that I take. So that was the message. And the message for the next year is it's true stories. What we want to show is to show the true stories of the families from around Poland, not only big cities, not only influencers and actors, but normal stories from around Poland, to show the role models and show how it influences the well-being of the family, the well-being of the father, mother, and especially child. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I think we have half an hour for questions or remarks. So maybe we will take a set of 3 or 4 questions and remarks, and then we'll make a rapid turn. So yeah, please.
Hi, this is for the LOTTECARD presentation.
Wilfred, I had some order here, so please. I had one question here, then Ignacio, then you, and then you. Okay, you are the first.
Thank you for all this insight and discussion. My name is Seung-Jin Baek, and from UNFPA East and Southern Africa Regional Office. And also me being as a Korean national with the 3 kids is a sort of outlier from Korea's low fertility trajectory. For me, this seems a sort of strong consensus in this all the session and discussion that parental leave has positive impact, but detail, devil is detail. But just reflecting Professor Allan's presentation, I'm sure there is either by directional causality or unilateral causality, and also reverse causality has been taken into account. But evidence is clear from my side. However, the practicality and implementation is an issue that I'd like to bring into your field of thought, that is such policies must be understood as a long-term investment. Investment is always good, but we are navigating, this kind of play within the limited resources, like, which requires societal acceptance to achieve their intended impact. In other words, these policies primarily funded either through taxes, social security funds, and also direct contributions from businesses themselves. So given current physical constraint facing Korea, raising tax burden due to also aging population, another hot topic to be explored, and fragility of businesses, Lotte credit card company, tied to national macroeconomic conditions. So ensuring widespread social consensus and guaranteeing policy stability and predictability is critical. So my question is, this is all about sustainability of policy direction, which goes to Dr. Kyunghee, in terms of how the government ensure fostering this societal buy-in and design resilient system to support such long-term investment. And same question goes to 이복희 위원장님 from LOTTECARD, in terms of how to manage interconnectedness between such long-term investment for parental leave and your own corporate value, profitability. In other words, corporate responsibility to stakeholder. So you talked about, you need a type of support from government, but still those are taxation. That is burden also comes from the citizens. So maybe my question is a little bit broader, but I would like to focus and listen your wisdom about implementation part. Thank you.
Thank you. Ignacio Paddock.
And congratulations for a very interesting set of presentations. Mine is a very short question, also about the LOTTECARD policies. I'm curious about the flexi work schedule, which is a kind of policy that we often don't pay that much attention to. I understood that people are allowed to show up 30 minutes late to work, and that's part of the flexibility they are allowed to. But I would like to know a little bit more, if you can elaborate a little bit more on that, on the flexibility that parents are allowed in the company. Thanks.
Thank you, Michael Herman.
Thank you. Yes. Look, we had some very clear statements as regards the replacement rate, what is desirable, 100% equal for women and men. Now, in terms of the duration of parental leave, do we have an upper and a lower bound where we can really say within this bound that's most effective? This is too little, this is too much. Ms. Kim, you mentioned 1 year, that 1 year would be ideal. Is that 1 year for women and men? Is that equal? I mean, what does the literature say about the ideal length of paternity and maternity leave, both? Okay. And then would this be taken, I mean, there's of course different models, but maybe some things are more successful than others. Is it desirable that this is being taken basically before the age of 3 of the child, or can this be extended for longer? Can you take this whenever you want it? And different countries have different models here. I mean, Portugal has one model, Germany, my own country, has a completely different model in terms of when this can be taken. Do we have an ideal scenario and any evidence on that? Over.
Thank you. So we have 2 last questions. So Julia Bunting.
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you to all the panelists. Absolutely fascinating discussions and lots of questions and comments that I'm sure we can follow up over the next 2 days. Maybe just to limit myself to one question, I wanted to ask of Dr. Lee. I think, Dr. Kim, you already asked about that there is any impact on the fertility rate for people by the LOTTECARD company. But I had a second question as well, which was around the business benefits of your policy. You talked about very high retention rates. And as we think about, again, engaging more organizations in these conversations, to be able to sort of show the bottom line benefit of having a flexible workforce, having high retention rates, have you been able to quantify the business benefits of having these policies in place? Thank you.
Thank you. Last question, Anna Rotkish.
Yes, thank you. A very stimulating discussion. This is to follow up on the previous comments. I really like the emphasis on 100%, also as changing the narrative. But then we come to the question of duration and also about the flexibility once you are back to work. So I would like to ask what the typical working hours are after a Korean mother and father have returned to work. And in addition to the flexi work, do you have possibilities for breastfeeding? Because if you have only 1 year and if the parents would share equally, you really have big problems with breastfeeding. Thank you.
Thank you. So I will give the floor to the members of the session. Maybe just a word about this long-term investment. I think that the well-being of the people and the parents and the employees, and maybe for the firm, the fact to attract employees can be considered a short-term investment. So the long-term investment is about maybe increasing the fertility rate, but is that the primary aim of the parental leave? I'm not totally sure, but I think that this individual short-term impact, and it has been said already, has to be could be put forward as a justification of this implementation. But let me ask you so rapidly if we want to make a second turn of questions, if you want to answer the remarks and questions. So Anna.
Thank you very much. So first of all, there was a question about flexi-work schedules and fertility. So there are several papers about that. One is led by Anna Matysiak. I'm a co-author of that paper that shows that actually work from home is helping mothers after birth to get back to work. So this is not about fertility, but like the link between having a kid and going back to work. But we also wrote a paper, which actually I led, on the work from home and fertility intentions. So not really the impact on fertility, but on fertility intentions in Poland. And we show that work from home indeed, especially in the pandemic, helped, not helped, but it was related to higher fertility intentions, but under certain conditions. So first of all, if there were not kids at home for long periods of time during the pandemic, and actually that variable, the length of having kids at home during the pandemic, is one of the most important moderators of any positive effect of work on women employment, career prospects, fertility intentions, all of that. So that was first thing. A second thing, also we've shown that working from home seemed to be helpful for thinking about future fertility among Polish women if they experience some financial difficulties during the pandemic. So it kind of like, I think, balanced some negative aspects of the pandemic by helping them to reduce costs. Yeah, but of course, these are not quasi-experimental studies. This is only about fertility intentions. So I would be very cautious about drawing conclusions. But some research is emerging on the link between working from home and fertility, also about women employment after having children. When it comes to how long, the questions, I think there were actually two questions about how long it should be parental leave. It's a very difficult question. I think that for women in many countries, it's already an accepted thing to have a 1 year, to being out of work for 1 year. So employers are accepting it's fine if the mother is 1 year out of work. But for fathers, it's not yet so, of course. So it will take time. I don't have a good answer, one simple answer, how long parental leave should be well paid for both mothers and fathers. But I would say that this is extremely important to close the childcare gap. So have availability of childcare as soon as possible, just after the end of parental leave, and probably year and a half of a leave that is also divided into parents would be a good, I would say, a good a period. There's no clear answer from the literature on how long the combined leave for mothers and fathers should be, right? To be good for parents, because we are not talking about the influence of fertility now, right? I understand that we are talking about, in general, being good for parents, for their ability to get back to work, but also for them to arrange childcare, housework, and paid work all together. There was a very important question, I think, also from two people about flexibility. This is a tricky one, I would say, because on one hand, flexibility is good. And for example, Sweden is a very good example of a country that enables parents to, first of all, use very short periods of time, and also, secondly, up to a quite long. I'm not, if I'm not mistaken, it's 6 or 8 even years. When a child is up to 6 or 8 years old, parents can use their parental leave entitlements. But there's also, it's a good thing to have a flexibility. But on the other hand, if the scheme is also too flexible, then it prevents fathers of taking longer periods of time in one period and taking care of kid by themselves for long periods of time, and therefore creating a bond. And this is super important. I think Karolina already mentioned it. It's extremely important for fathers to be alone on leave with children for longer periods of time, let's say not 2 weeks, but like a month. That's a period during which they can really become the proper carers and not only helpers for mothers. Karolina already mentioned that before the introduction of this father quota in Poland in 2023, before, the average length of parental leave taken by fathers, but remember, it was only 1% of fathers who took parental leave, but the average length was 80 days. What it means, it meant that these were fathers very engaged. These were the fathers who had to negotiate with mothers to take the leave, because the leave was shareable. That was a shareable leave. It could be taken by mothers or fathers. So the fathers who took that leave were very engaged fathers. They really wanted to do it. And it were very often cases where the mother was earning a lot. And therefore, it was financially good for the family that the father took the leave. But after the introduction of this father quota of 9 weeks, she mentioned that the average length shortened to 40 or 50 days, right? Exactly, 48 days. This means that these new fathers who take this non-transferable part of leave take very short periods of time. And in the interviews, in the research that I'm coordinating right now, we had interviews with fathers who took long periods of leave and those who just took this new non-transferable leave. And the motivations behind taking that leave were very different. So for these fathers, this last sentence, for these fathers who took this new solution, this non-transferable leave, these fathers mostly took the leave to extend their vacations with the family, which is, of course, also okay because they spend more time with the family, but they are just helping mothers, and they are also taking this leave, for example, to change jobs, to pursue their hobbies. They spend their time with the kid, but it's not what we really wish for, right? So as Karolina mentioned, we should think about some part of parental leave being for parents only, but on the condition that they are alone with the child at home. Thank you.
Thank you. Allan, do you want to comment?
Yes, there was a question about the ideal lengths, and I fully agree with what Anna said, that based on studies, empirical studies, we probably cannot give a good recipe, but we can think about this question from people's perspective, and this perspective probably tells us that there is some general lengths that could be between 1 year or a little bit more, but at the same time we have to take into account that families have different expectations, and this means that the ideal may be different or for certain type of families and different for other families. So it's clear that whatever the overall lengths or overall provision, there should be enough flexibility to adapt to different situations. And for example, one way to do this, allow this flexibility, is really to allow part-time working at the same time when people get parental leave, and this is a case in Sweden and probably in many more countries, also in Estonia, that you can take this leave later on if you want, but you can also take it on a part-time basis. So there are different options and practices that you can see in different countries.
Thank you. Dr. Lee.
네, 저에게 질문을 많이 하셔가지고 네, 좀 간단하게 답변 드리도록 하겠습니다. 한국 기업들의 상황에 대해서 질문해 주셨습니다. 굉장히 그 기업들마다 그 케이스가 다르다, 상황이 다르다 이렇게 말씀드릴 수 있을 것 같아요. 정부에서는 최소한의 것만 이제 그 남녀고용평등법에 규율을 해놓고 실제로 현재 기업의 처한 상황에 따라서 노사 간의 협약에 따라서 굉장히 다르게 하고 있습니다. 한국전력 같은 경우는 지금 육아휴직 기간이 3년입니다. 그리고 롯데카드나 대부분의 대기업들은 1+1, 2년을 하고 있습니다. 그래서 굉장히 그 기업마다 다르다 이런 말씀 드리고요. 그리고 육아휴직 급여는 이제 아까 이제 80% 정도 70에서 80%가 이상적인 그 지급액이다라고 말씀하셨는데 한국도 지금 통상임금의 80%까지 지급하도록 되어 있는데 우리는 그 맥시멈이 있어요. 맥시멈이 지금 150만 원이라서 이 맥시멈을 지금 올리는 그런 작업들을 지금 그런 그 올려야 된다는 목소리들이 지금 많이 나오고 있습니다. 그리고 기업의 사회적 책임에 대해서도 말씀하신 제가 질문을 잘 이해를 못했는데 이렇게 일가정 양립, 육아휴직 제도를 활성화하는 것이 기업의 사회적 책임이냐 이런 질문이셨던 것 같습니다. 근데 대부분의 한국 기업들은 저출산 문제가 우리나라의 굉장히 중요한 아젠다라고 인식하고 여기를 해결하기 위해서 동참해야 된다 이런 공감대가 지금 형성이 되어 있습니다. 그래서 이것을 부담으로 생각하지 않고 근로자들이 또 원하고 있고 이런 방향에서 지금 하고 있습니다만 이제 문제는 중소기업입니다. 그래서 중소기업의 경우 이 육아휴직으로 인한 대체 인력의 부담을 어떻게 해소할 것인지 이게 한국 사회 정책에 우리나라 정책에서 지금 이제 문제점으로 보여집니다. 어느 한 공공기관에 제가 일가정 양립 자문을 간 적이 있는데 이 공공기관은 전국에 사업장이 138개소가 있어요. 그러니까 한국이 굉장히 작은 나라입니다만 이 전국적으로 138개는 굉장히 그 많은 거거든요. 그러면 대부분의 가족들이 서울에 머물고 있습니다. 근데 우리는 발령을 받아야 돼요. 근무지가 다르기 때문에. 그래서 이 기관은 어떻게 일가정 양립을 할지 고민을 하였는데 그때 이제 제가 제안한 것이 재택근로였습니다. 육아휴직으로 모든 걸 해결할 수가 없습니다. 왜냐하면 육아휴직은 8세 이하의 자녀를 양육할 때만 신청할 수 있기 때문에 현재 한국법에 그래서 그 육아기 초등 중등의 자녀를 가진 그 엄마들, 워킹맘들의 고충이 굉장히 많았습니다. 그래서 그때는 이제 재택근로를 이제 도입하는 방향으로 제가 제안을 해줬는데요. 그래서 육아휴직과 다른 유연근로라든지 재택근로라든지 이런 부분을 좀 병합해서 쓰는 것이 그 워킹맘들의 일가정 양립을 제고하는 근로자들의 삶의 질을 제고하는 그런 방안이 아닐까 이런 생각이 들었습니다. 그래서 아까 육아휴직이 끝나고 나서 기업에서는 어떻게 그것을 보충해서 하느냐라는 말씀에 대한 답변도 될 수 있을 것 같습니다. 그래서 유연 근로제가 꼭 그 같이 병합이 돼야 된다 이렇게 말씀드리고요. 근데 유연 근로제를 쓰기 쉽지 않지 않느냐라는 질문도 있으셨는데 사실 많은 기업에서 그 부분이 좀 활성화가 덜 돼 있는 것 같습니다. 그래서 롯데카드는 자기가 결제 내서 그러니까 상사의 결제를 받지 않고 하도록 하는 제도를 도입해서 굉장히 활성화되어 있다 이런 말씀을 드립니다. 그리고 이 육아휴직의 이상적인 기간에 대해서도 많은 질문이 있었는데요. 이것도 케이스 바이 케이스로 나라마다 다르고 회사마다 다르고 내 개인의 가족의 상황마다 다르고 다 다를 것 같습니다. 근데 분명한 거는 남녀 모두 똑같이 그 기간을 부여해야 한다라는 점입니다. 이것도 어느 한 기업의 사례인데요. 그 기업에 갔더니 제가 이제 그 일가정 양립 자문하러 거기도 갔는데 남성에게는 1년, 여성에게는 2년의 육아휴직을 부여하고 있었습니다. 그래서 이거를 근데 굉장히 자랑스럽게 생각하면서 얘기를 하는 거예요. 그래서 제가 왜 다르게 부여했냐 그랬더니 여성에게 혜택을 더 주는 거다. 이렇게 말씀을 하셔서 제가 깜짝 놀랐습니다. 대부분의 사람들이 그렇게 생각을 하고 있더라고요. 그건 아닙니다. 육아휴직을 더 주는 것이 여성에게 혜택을 주는 것이 아니라 육아는 남녀 아까 말씀하신 것처럼 남녀가 똑같이 맞돌봄을 해야 하기 때문에 육아휴직 기간도 똑같이 부여합니다. 그래서 제가 이것은 당장 고쳐야 된다. 남녀 똑같이 기간을 부여해야 된다. 이렇게 말씀드렸고요. 그래서 기간을 산정할 때 우리가 고려할 점, 첫 번째는 남녀 동등하게 해야 하고 두 번째는 복귀를 원활하게 할 수 있는 프로그램을 잘해야 합니다. 많은 분들이 복귀할 때 두려움을 느낍니다. 내가 가서 잘할 수 있을까? 이런 복귀에 대한 두려움 때문에 경력을 중단하는 사례가 많이 발생하고 있습니다. 그래서 이런 복귀를 지원하는 프로그램을 함께 병행해야만 육아휴직을 성공적으로 현장에서 안착할 수가 있다라는 말씀을 꼭 드리고 싶고요. 아까 줄리아님께서 그럼 이러한 제도들이 비즈니스에 어떤 이익을 주고 저출산에 어떤 효과가 있느냐 이런 질문에 있어서는 이렇게 답변 드리겠습니다. 롯데카드가 이런 정책을 하게 된 것은 첫째는 우수한 인재를 양성하기 위하고 우수한 인재를 유치하기 위해서입니다. 많은 한국의 젊은이들이 보수를 많이 주는 것도 좋지만 일가정 양립제도가 잘 정착된 회사에 취업하고 싶어 합니다. 그래서 일가정 양립제도를 잘하는 것이 우수한 인재를 끌어들일 수 있고 우수한 인재가 와야만 회사의 비즈니스 성공할 수 있다는 그런 공감대가 점점 형성이 되고 있습니다. 그래서 그런 측면에서 이제 이런 정책을 시작을 했고 그러다 보니 워킹맘들한테 유리해지고 그리고 또 이제 아버지들도 육아휴직에 참여하면서 전반적인 근로자들의 삶의 질이라든지 이런 부분에 이제 긍정적인 그런 생산적인 효과를 갖고 온다 이렇게 말씀드릴 수 있고요. 비즈니스에 분명한 것은 비즈니스에 이익이 있다는 점입니다. 이 부분이. 왜냐하면 근로자의 만족도가 올라가고 생산성이 올라가기 때문에 올라가지만 그거를 계량적으로 데이터로 산출하지는 못했습니다. 앞으로 그런 부분을 더 신경 써서 데이터로 제시할 수 있도록 노력하겠습니다. 네, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
5가지 질문을 주셨는데 우선 순서대로 답변 간단하게 설명드리겠습니다. 우선 첫 번째는 이제 예산이나 이런 거 말씀하셨는데 맞습니다. 정부가 무한대로 예산을 제공할 수 없습니다. 그래서 한국 정부는 기업의 역할을 강조하고 있습니다. 지금 롯데카드처럼 가족 친화 인증 기업이라는 증명서를 발급을 하고 있습니다. 지금 기업의 이미지가 좋으면 좋은 인재를 유치도 할 수 있고 그다음 여러 가지 만족도도 좋아지는데 여러분 ESG라는 걸 많이 들어보셨을 겁니다. Environmental, Social, Governance라 그러는데 한국에선 EPG가 있습니다. Environmental, Population, Governance입니다. 그만큼 인구에 대한 모든 거를 다 영향을 집중하기 때문에 기업의 입장에서도 기업의 이미지와 그다음에 기업의 공동 책임이다. 이런 문제를 해결하는데 그래서 아까 말씀드린 가족 친화 인증 기업이 2013년에는 500개에 불과했습니다. 하지만 2023년에는 6,000개, 즉 10배 이상이 많이 증가했습니다. 그런 걸 봤을 때는 기업의 역할도 많이 강조되고 그다음에 많이 참여하고 있다. 이렇게 설명을 드리겠습니다. 두 번째, 유연근무를 질문하셨는데요. 한국의 유연근무는 기업의 선택이었습니다. 하지만은 지금 아까 여러 차례 말씀드리지만 한국 정부가 6월 달에 대대적인 저출산 대책을 마련했습니다. 그때 뭐를 강조했냐면 유연근무제를 제도화하겠다. 그래서 재택근무라든지 시간제 근무라든지 시차 출퇴근제를 근로자들이 아무런 부담 없이 활용할 수 있도록 제도화시킨다고 하고 있습니다. 세 번째는 육아휴직의 기간입니다. 많은 분들이 지금 육아휴직의 기간이 1년이 적합하냐 적합하지 않냐를 하시는데 저는 얼마 전에 노벨 경제학상을 받으신 클라우디아 골든 교수의 책 제목이 캐리어 앤 패밀리입니다. 여자들은 집에서 아이만 돌보고 경력 단절하면서 다시 복귀하는 걸 원하지 않습니다. 일과 가정을 같이 양립하고 싶습니다. 캐리어 앤 패밀리가 주는 책 제목의 주된 내용이 뭐냐면 어떻게 그런 거를 우리가 잘 활용하느냐. 그중에 가장 큰 특징이 이런 육아휴직 페어런털 리브를 떠나서 다시 한번 나의 원래 직업으로 복귀하는 과정입니다. 이것이 길어진다고 해서 과연 좋을 거는 물론 연구를 해봐야 되겠지만 그건 다음 과제로 넘기도록 하겠습니다. 네 번째는 롯데카드 설명해 주셨고 마지막으로 모유 수유를 언급을 해주셨는데 한국에선 육아기 단축 시간이 있습니다. 이거는 뭐냐면은 8세 이하의 자녀를 가지신 분이 내가 육아휴직을 못하지만은 나의 근무 시간을 하루에 2시간 단축을 할 수 있습니다. 그거는 아침에 9시부터 11시까지 쓸 수도 있고 4시부터 6시까지 자유롭게 쓸 수가 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 육아기 단축 시간을 이용해서 자기가 자기 일을 유지하면서 아이 돌봄을 하는데 기여하고 있습니다. 예, 감사합니다.
Thank you. So, Ms. Anna.
I would like to refer to maybe duration of the parental leave. Of course, we are after as much equal duration for mother and father, but we also need to be we need to know about the absence of the mothers from the work resulting not only from parental leave. Because in Poland, when you talk to the employers, they always say that they assume when the woman is pregnant, that her absence will be 2 years. And the parental leave is 1 year only in Poland. How it happens? How it's possible? The sick leave during the pregnancy in Poland is paid 100%. And women in Poland, as soon as they get pregnant, a lot of women are taking sick leave. So if I ask the question, how many of pregnant Polish women are on sick leave longer than 6 months in Poland, it's about 60% of the women. And also after the parental leave, when you are on parental leave during 1 year, you are getting more holiday leave as well. So you are on sick leave before the child is born, then you have parental leave, and then you have your holidays leave that you gathered before, so you saved for this situation. So it's 2 years. So this is extremely important that we take this context and talk about, I would call it pathology of the benefits for the parents, because we need to make sure that the reason why we are implementing some policies are the same why people are using these benefits. And regarding the breastfeed, also another example. In Poland, when you are coming back to work, you can work 1 hour less for 2 years for the breastfeeding. Of course, no one is checking this, not all on the employers, but a lot of women are using this not for breastfeeding. Because the breastfeeding in Poland, when the child gets 1 year, is about 8% only. And we have a lot of women using this benefit. But why? Why they are using this? They are using this to be able to spend more time with the child. So our proposition is to make conversation to be honest why we are implementing, and maybe we should implement 1 hour shorten duration of the work for all parents, because we know that breastfeeding is not really what people are using this. And also the flexibility, also extremely important, and remote working. We know already that this is important for women coming back to work. But remember, not every child is born within the family that both parents are working in the office. There is a lot of people working in the production sector, or, for example, in trade in shops and etc. And this is extremely important to remember about these people when we are planning policies, and we are planning solutions within also employers to include this kind of families, because from the child perspective, if we are really thinking about benefits of the child, we shouldn't be concentrated only on people who are working in offices, but we should think about all kinds of families. So this is also important, and the struggle over there is much more difficult. And I really argue to think about flexibility also within this kind of the sectors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, well, I think it's time to end the session. So I would want to thank the presenters and the discussants, as well as the translators who made a magnificent job. So thank you very much. And maybe you have some announcement to make?
Yes, so thank you all. Let's thank them with a big round of applause. So I'd like to now invite all the participants to a hosted luncheon at Karolina Hotel, which is located just 5-minute walk from this venue. So please scan the QR code that is printed. The QR code will access the map to the hotel, and I'd like to ask everyone to take a little walk. Indeed, actually, there's the rainbow outside the window, and you can enjoy the view. So to find the map, you can